Hi, I'm Isola. I used to think staying quiet kept the peace in my family, until silence made me disposable. Clean this up, my sister barked across the office like I was the cleaning staff. She called me workplace trash, and everyone laughed. But the stain on the floor wasn't the problem. It was the years of being erased, inch by inch. They took my name off reports, cut me out of family photos, redirected my father's will, all while telling me I was the strong one. So I stayed. I waited. I gathered every receipt. And when I fired the whole executive board, including her, she dropped to her knees and whispered, "Please, don't shut me out forever." Why would a sister do that? And why did everyone let her? I got to the office early that Monday morning, like I always did. The hallway lights were still dim, the kind of hush that clings to an empty building before everyone else arrives. I liked it that way. I liked the quiet. You could think when no one was around to talk over you. I placed my purse under my desk and took a slow breath. I'd reviewed the quarterly expense summary twice over the weekend and stayed up late Sunday night rechecking cross-department discrepancies. I didn't mind the work. I was good at it. And in truth, it was the one place where no one could argue with the numbers. Facts don't play favorites. People do. At 8:13 a.m., I walked past the glass break room and saw the usual suspects gathered. Valora's inner circle. Expensive coffee cups in hand, sharp heels, and sharper tongues. No one turned when I passed. I'd stopped expecting them to. I wasn't part of the branding team or the glamorous client-facing crowd. I worked in finance, the back end, the invisible wheel that kept the train from derailing. By the time I sat down and opened my laptop, I could already hear her voice, Valora, cutting through the hallway like it paid rent. I didn't look up, just kept typing, eyes on the spreadsheet. But I heard her enter the break room, high heels stabbing the floor like punctuation marks. Then came the words, "Who the hell spilled coffee? This is disgusting." She paused. "You, Isola! Clean this up. You're closer to the floor anyway." Everything stopped. The air got tight. I didn't move. The room full of coworkers, interns, associates, they all went dead silent. Then, as if on cue, a few chuckles. Someone laughed too loud, too fast. Another mumbled, "Oof," like he wasn't sure if he was supposed to join in or not. I stood there, holding a manila folder, watching Valora stare at me like I was the janitor she was fed up with. "You heard me, right?" she said louder, turning her body so the others could see her take control. "Or are you busy doing math stuff?" I wanted to say something, anything, but all I did was turn on my heel and walk away. As I passed the intern desk, I heard one of them mutter under her breath to the guy next to her, "She's used to it. Finance rats don't matter." It wasn't just the words, it was the way they said them, casual, like it was a joke they'd told before, like it had already been said in chats and threads I wasn't invited to. Back at my desk, I didn't cry. I didn't slam anything. I just sat down, reopened my spreadsheet, and resumed work like it was just another Monday. 2 hours later, I overheard a pair of managers by the printer. One of them chuckled and said, "Did you see the new meme? Trash tracker, now with expense fraud sensors." I knew immediately. I turned my screen slightly, opened the internal chat portal, and clicked a tab one of them had left open during a shared screen session last week. There it was. My initials photoshopped onto a cartoon raccoon digging through a dumpster labeled Company Budgets. Caption, "Workplace trash. Hundreds of laugh reacts. A GIF response of a trash compactor. A string of hashtags. Office rats. Clean it up." Should have gone back to accounting. I didn't feel humiliated anymore. I felt something else. Like I was floating outside myself, watching the way people strip someone down, piece by piece, while smiling. No one apologized. No one asked if I was okay. In the same hour, someone even sent a meeting invite with me, listed as support role. Support. I minimized the browser, pressed save on my spreadsheet again, out of habit, and stood up. I walked to the restroom, shut the door, and looked at myself in the mirror. Same navy blouse, same practical bun, same woman who built the budget process that kept this company from going under 2 fiscal years ago. And now? A joke in a group chat, a meme to laugh at during lunch breaks. I stared at my own reflection and whispered, I built this floor. I paid for this office, before she ever learned to manage a calendar. The lights flickered overhead. I didn't flinch. You want me to clean up? I murmured, looking straight into my own eyes. Fine. Let's start with this entire company. I didn't say anything else to my reflection. I just rinsed my hands, straightened the collar of my blouse, and walked out of that restroom like the walls hadn't just heard me make a promise I couldn't take back. The rest of the day passed in a quiet blur. Paperwork, polite nods, hollow smiles. No one brought up what happened in the break room that morning. Of course they didn't. It was easier to pretend nothing happened when you weren't the one being humiliated. By the time I left the office, the sun had already ducked behind the hills. Downtown Seattle had that washed-out amber glow the city wore just before night took over. I didn't take the freeway home. I took the long route down Elliott Avenue, windows down, letting the cool air slap against my skin. I didn't feel like going straight home, but I also didn't feel like being anywhere else. My apartment sat on the edge of Queen Anne. Quiet, top floor, no shared walls, no photos on the walls, no family portraits, just beige, white, and steel. I dropped my keys in the bowl by the door, kicked off my shoes, and turned on the kettle. The silence inside matched the one I'd kept inside myself all day. I didn't cry. I haven't in years. Instead, I sat on the couch with my laptop balanced on my knees, scrolling through expense reports, trying to convince myself I still cared. That's when my phone buzzed. Mom. I stared at the notification without opening it for a moment. My thumb hovered over the screen. Then I tapped. Don't escalate this. Your sister's reputation matters to the family. That was it. No greeting. No, how are you? No, what happened? Just an instruction. A warning wrapped in fake concern. I reread it, blinking slowly. My mother didn't ask if I was okay. She didn't ask if it was true. She didn't even pretend to check on me. The only thing she cared about was Valora's image, and that wasn't new. I set the phone down on the coffee table, next to a half-finished cup of tea that had gone cold. My fingers clenched around the edge of the cushion beside me. You always take her side, I whispered into the empty room. My voice sounded foreign. I leaned back and let the silence wrap around me. Then, as if someone had hit play on a film reel I couldn't stop, the memories came back. Sunday dinners when we were kids. Valora got the big plate, the seat next to Dad, the first slice of cake. I got the dishes, the scraped leftovers, the smile that meant, you're a good girl for understanding. She's older, you're the patient one. You're the smart one, she's the face. You'll get your time. My time never came. I was 12 when Valora crashed her car into a neighbor's mailbox and blamed me for distracting her. She didn't even blink when she said it. I got grounded for a month. I was 15 when she accidentally copied my essay and got an award for it. Mom told me to be proud for both of us. I was 17 when I got into a state university on my own, and Valora got a private college acceptance after Dad pulled some strings. Guess who they threw the party for? Everything about my life had been a hand-me-down, even my dignity. My phone lit up again. Same message, still no follow-up. I opened the messaging app and typed, "Understood," but I didn't hit send. Instead, I opened the Notes app. I stared at the blinking cursor, then began typing slowly, deliberately. I will never again be the daughter who takes the fall so someone else can shine. I read it 3 times. Then I added a second line. Let them pick sides. I'm done begging to be seen. I saved it, closed the app. Then I picked up the phone, stared at Mom's message one last time, and deleted it without responding. I placed the phone face down. I could hear the city traffic outside, the occasional bark of a dog, the hum of someone's television 2 floors down. But inside my apartment, it was still. I exhaled through my nose, leaned forward, and whispered to myself, let's see how much of her reputation she can keep when the truth starts bleeding. The drizzle hadn't stopped since sundown. It beat gently against the living room window, tapping a rhythm that filled the silence my mother had left hanging. I hadn't turned on any lights, just let the laptop screen be the only source of glow in the room. The tea had gone cold, and I didn't bother reheating it. Some things aren't worth salvaging once they've sat too long. I clicked into an old folder I hadn't opened in years, one I'd created after Dad died. Estate documents. It wasn't a place I went to often, mostly because it reminded me of how little he left behind for me, and how much had somehow ended up in Valora's hands. Scrolling down, I saw subfolders: tax returns, property titles, photos, scans. I clicked on the last one. The screen flickered for a moment before displaying a grid of faded JPEGs and PDFs. School certificates, birthday cards, scanned handwritten notes. But one image caught my attention. It was labeled Senior Year, Acceptance Letter.pdf. I opened it. There it was, the letter I'd tried so hard to forget. I'd been 17. Quiet, awkward, but finally, recognized for something I had created with my own hands. A full-ride scholarship to an art institute in Portland, a place I had dreamed of since I was 13. They'd picked me for my portfolio, not my grades, not my face, just what I'd made. I remember the night I brought the letter to dinner. I was beaming, I'll admit that. Even Dad smiled. But then Mom said it. The words that undid the moment like pulling a single thread in a sweater. It's better if Valora takes it. She's got the grades, the discipline, and, let's be honest, she photographs better. They'll be glad to have her. You'll find something else. Maybe accounting. You're good with numbers. No one looked at me after that, like the decision had been made and I just needed to accept it. That night, I tore the letter in half and flushed it down the toilet. No one ever asked why I stopped drawing. I closed the file, my chest tight, then clicked on the next image, one labeled Company Launch, PR Event. The photo loaded slowly. For a second, I couldn't breathe. It was the launch party for Valora Group 6 years ago. I remembered that night vividly. I'd stood right beside Valora on stage, holding the champagne glass she'd refused to carry because she didn't want fingerprints in photos. I'd introduced her to our first major client. I'd even drafted the original financial model. But in this photo, I was gone. Cropped. Neatly. Precisely. Gone. Only Valora remained in the frame, smiling, standing alone as if she'd built the company from the ground up by herself. My fingers hovered over the trackpad. I zoomed in, just to be sure. The angle of the champagne glass confirmed it. It had been passed to her just after the speech. That moment used to have both of us in it. Now it was just her, sparkling under warm lights, smiling for cameras. I sat there for a while, not moving, not thinking, because this wasn't an accident. It wasn't the first time, and it sure as hell wouldn't be the last if I kept pretending it didn't matter. They didn't erase me with rage or cruelty. They erased me with silence, with editing, with a mission, 1 inch at a time. She's the face. You're the structure. She's the one we can show. You're the one who supports. You're good at disappearing. That's a strength. I whispered to myself, they never erased me by force. They did it by design. I moved the photo file into a new folder and renamed it. Recovery begins here. Then, without hesitation, I opened a new spreadsheet and titled it Ownership Timeline. This time, I would write the story in a language they couldn't crop out. 2 days passed. I didn't rush anything. I came in exactly on time, not a minute early like I used to. No coffee in hand, no smile for the receptionist. I moved through the building like someone who'd lived through a fire and now knew exactly which beams were hollow. The conference prep room was already half full. I stepped in quietly and took a seat at the far end of the table. My revised forecast report sat neatly in my bag. Not a soul acknowledged me as I sat down. No glance, no nod, no mention of what had happened in that break room earlier in the week. It was as if none of it had occurred. The laughter, the stain, the command to clean it up like I was part of the janitorial staff. Forgotten. Valora wasn't there yet, but the team buzzed around like bees waiting on their queen. Junior managers leafed through folders, straightening their backs whenever someone from senior leadership passed by. A manila packet was slid across the table toward me. "Printouts?" a younger manager muttered, not looking up. I opened the folder and turned to the title page of the presentation deck. And there it was. Again. My name, misspelled. Again. I didn't blink, didn't sigh. I simply checked the footer to see who had compiled the final deck. Edited, Valora.d, of course. I opened my email to trace the thread. Just as I suspected, Valora had submitted the final version to design. I had sent my reviewed and formatted file a day prior. Corrected, aligned, clean. And now I was Isloa Deland, like a typo on a throwaway receipt. I raised my hand slightly, not high, not enough to make a scene. "Excuse me," I said, eyes trained on the man who had slid the folder my way. "There's a spelling error in the deck, my name." He shrugged. "It's probably just an oversight." Valora walked in just then, voice bright, perfume sharper than necessary. "Oh, that?" she said, glancing over. "Don't be so sensitive, Isola. It's a name, not a trademark." A few chuckles followed. Light, harmless, just enough to sting. I didn't answer. I closed the folder and adjusted my seat. She stood at the front now, poised, pointing toward the screen. "Let's walk through the client-facing strategy for Q3. I'll explain what I developed for risk allocation and cost containment." Risk allocation, cost containment, the slide deck she was referring to? Mine. The one I'd spent 3 months building, hours of analysis, projections, simulations. And now, it had her name at the bottom of every slide. She hadn't even changed the formatting, my structure, my graphs, my embedded footnotes, still there. She'd just slapped her initials over it like a stamp of ownership. No one questioned it. Of course they didn't. They saw her as the face. I was just the woman who sent the budget drafts at 10 p.m. While she presented my data like it was hers, I stayed silent. Not frozen, just watching. I clicked open my own laptop. The folder sat there, waiting. Truth Protocol. Inside it, time-stamped emails, original documents, changelogs. I opened a blank note and typed slowly. "Let them talk. I'll speak once. That'll be enough." The room applauded her last slide. Her voice rang out, confident and polished. I clicked open my email, addressed a message to myself, attached the original version of the forecast deck, and typed in the subject line. RE, ownership of all work presented today. I hit send. And I smiled. Just a little. The email sat in my inbox for exactly 4 minutes before I opened it. I'd just returned from the conference room, my palms still warm from the subtle applause Valora stole off my back. I had set my laptop down on the small desk in one of the side offices, quiet, rarely used, and was preparing to return to a normal afternoon of ledger reviews and upcoming Q4 projections. But there it was. From Thorn Kazan subject. "You deserve to see this." I hadn't seen Thorn's name in months, maybe longer. He was the former IT manager, the one who vanished from the main office after what HR called departmental restructuring. We all knew better. I clicked the attachment. It was a PDF export, Slack transcripts. The file name read, exec, channel, export, private, Slack data. PDF I didn't have to scroll far. Why is she still here? Thought we'd made it clear. Finance rats are hard to kill, always sneaking under the radar. If she steps out of line again, we make her redundant, period. And then a meme. The same one from the hallway printer weeks ago, my initials pasted over a trash can. My thumb hovered over the trackpad. I kept reading. The conversation continued with casual cruelty, as if I were an object they forgot could feel. I closed the laptop, then reopened it. I replied to Thorne's email. "You gave me more than evidence. You gave me the right to be angry. Thank you." It wasn't poetry, but it was honest. A few minutes passed. I heard faint laughter down the hall, Valora's voice rising like it always did when she knew someone was listening. I stood, printed the file, and slid the pages into a plain gray folder. No labels, no dramatics. Later that afternoon, I waited until the floor cleared out. I passed by the glass corridor that led to the HR director's office, Ms. Ramirez. She was finishing up a call when I knocked once and stepped in without waiting. She looked up, surprised, but didn't speak. I placed the folder on her desk and met her eyes. She reached for it slowly, opening the flap just enough to glimpse the printout inside. Her expression didn't change. She closed the folder and slid it into the drawer beside her keyboard. "That's a serious allegation," she said quietly. "It's not an allegation if it's printed," I replied. She didn't nod, didn't frown, just tapped her fingernail against the drawer. "We'll see where this goes." I turned and left. No fanfare, no fireworks, just one more card placed on the table. By the time the sun dipped low enough to blur itself against the office glass, I was waiting for the elevator. The floor was quiet now, the energy shifting like something had exhaled after holding its breath too long. The doors opened, and there she was, Valora, alone. She stepped inside without looking at me, stood near the buttons like she owned the entire shaft. I entered without a word. The doors closed behind us. The silence was almost intimate. We passed floor after floor, and she still didn't acknowledge me. That was her power move. Pretend I didn't exist until it became inconvenient to keep pretending. But this time, I didn't stay quiet. I turned my head toward her. "You know what's funny?" She looked over, blinking like someone caught off guard for the first time in years. "I used to think your silence meant strength," I said. "Now I know it's just fear wearing heels." She opened her mouth, closed it, smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You don't have to play this game, Isola," she said softly. "It won't end the way you think." I leaned closer, just enough. "Do it again," I said, voice steady, "and the next person you'll answer to won't be me." The doors opened. She stepped out without a word. I stayed, let the doors close again. Back in the side office, I powered up my laptop, created a new folder on my desktop, and titled it, Timeline of Executive Abuse and Asset Manipulation. Then, I opened a blank document. At the top, I wrote, "This ends on my terms." I closed the document and leaned back, letting the cursor blink on that single sentence like a metronome. "This ends on my terms." It wasn't a declaration. It was a quiet vow. No courtroom speech, no corporate tantrum, just a record. A line in a timeline they'd never thought I'd build. By Sunday night, I had gone through every folder I could access remotely. My eyes were dry from screen glare, but my gut was more awake than ever. So when Monday came, I was the first one in the building. The halls were dim, the carpet still vacuum-striped from weekend cleaning. I bypassed my desk and walked straight to the lower-level records room. It was rarely used anymore. Everything had gone digital. But I remembered what we kept there in those early days. Original binders, hard copy contracts, scanned wire confirmations, and a few old bank ledgers we never bothered to destroy. I found what I was looking for on the fourth shelf, bottom row. A navy blue binder with a cracked spine and a silver label that read, Founding Capital. It was heavier than I remembered. I brought it to the small table and flipped through page after page until I found the wire receipt. $212,000. Transferred from a trust account. My name. My signature. Dated 3 months before Valora Group Communications even existed legally. It hadn't come from Valora. It wasn't mentioned in the press kits or the launch interviews. The official narrative had always been the same. built from the ground up by one woman's vision. Funny, that woman had never opened her own trust account. I traced the ridged emboss of the receipt header with my fingertip and whispered, "This company was built with my future, and they wrote me out of its history." As I packed up the binder and walked out, the early birds had started to arrive. A few nodded in passing, most didn't, but something in the way they glanced over their shoulders told me they'd started to notice the shift. Back at my desk, I locked the binder in my bottom drawer and opened my inbox. 3 unread messages. One stood out. From jordan.ellisofvaloragroup.com. Subject: Hey, can I share something? Jordan Ellis, junior accountant, barely out of grad school. I clicked it open. Hi, Isola, I just wanted to say, I saw how Valora talked to you last week. I didn't say anything. I should have. 3 years ago, I filed an HR report against someone on her team. It wasn't just me. Others had concerns too. Valora pulled me into her office and told me, "This isn't the hill you want to die on." The complaint was never submitted. HR said there was no follow-up. I still have the original draft if you want it. Just thought you should know you're not alone. I stared at the screen, then typed, "Forward it." 30 minutes later, I had the redacted complaint in my hand. Same tone, same dismissiveness, same pattern. And now, the second witness. At noon, I walked into the finance department's weekly update. Small room, 10 chairs, everyone chatting over lukewarm coffee. I took my usual seat at the corner and waited for the small talk to fade. I began to speak. Numbers, projections, cash flow stress points. Halfway through, Valora entered. She didn't knock. She didn't sit. She just cut in. "I'd like to add something to that. Isola and I have reviewed the figures, and—" I didn't let her finish. "No," I said, looking straight at her. "You will wait, and you will listen." The room went still. No one moved. No one sipped their coffee. Even the air felt like it stopped circulating. Valora blinked once, lips parting slightly. But I didn't let her speak again. I turned back to the team and continued. Slide by slide, word by word. By the end, my voice didn't shake, not once. That night, back at my apartment, I opened the folder that had slowly grown over the past week and renamed it Case File: Misappropriation, Abuse, and Concealed Funding Sources. I slipped a yellow sticky note on the front. It said one thing: Board ready. Wednesday came without warning. The clouds hadn't broken since Monday, and Seattle wore that gray sweater it clung to half the year. Damp, hushed, familiar. I arrived at the office an hour earlier than the rest. I wasn't there to beat traffic or to look dedicated. I was there to take a seat they'd spent years making sure I'd never touch. By 9, the top-floor conference room was lit like a surgical theater. Chrome table, white LED panels overhead, and a panoramic view of Elliott Bay that executives loved pointing to during investor calls. I'd never sat in that room before. Not really. Not with a seat and a nameplate and a packet of documents with my initials. This time, my name wasn't misspelled. The CFO, a man named Pritchard, who once told me in a hallway that I had a real talent for staying invisible, cleared his throat. "We've had a shift in voting shares this week," he announced to the room. The boardroom quieted. Valora raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. She was seated at the head, as usual, hands folded like a sermon was about to start. I stood, walked to the front of the room, and placed a folder on the table. I opened it slowly and laid out the proxy documentation for each holding company and individual investor I had acquired, accumulated, or quietly negotiated with over the last 18 months. Effective this morning, I said, I represent 53.4% of total shareholder voting power. I didn't smile, but I did watch Valora's lips tighten. Pritchard blinked, nodded once, and turned to the board. No one spoke. No one looked at Valora. Not yet. From my laptop, I projected a screen onto the board's monitor. A single PDF titled Capital Rescue, Q2 Internal Use Only. It took a second to load. "This wire," I said, pointing to the highlighted line, is the transfer that saved this company during last quarter's liquidity panic. Someone at the end of the table asked, "That was from the investor in Dubai, wasn't it?" I looked at him directly. "That investor," I said, "was me." A few heads turned. One of the women from legal looked at Valora, then back at me. I continued, calm but unwavering. "It came from my private trust, established by my father, the same trust that funded the company's original launch." I let the silence settle into the corners of the room. Valora finally laughed. Not loudly, just enough to force the air to shift. "So this is what you've been doing," she said, "buying up favors and secrets. Isola, come on. Are you really going to play this game?" I turned to her, unblinking. "You taught me the rules," I said. "I'm just finally playing." She stood slowly, the legs of her chair scraping the tile. "I don't think you understand what you're trying to burn down." "No," I said. "I think I finally understand exactly what you built." A murmur rippled across the board. No one moved to stop her. No one defended her. I sat down and pulled out the red folder I'd been carrying for a week. On the cover, irregularities in executive conduct and allocation practices. I passed it to Pritchard. Then one to legal, one to HR. Inside, receipts, messages, emails, internal transfers, rewritten documents. 2 complaints that never made it past HR's firewall. No raised voice, no finger pointed, just documentation. By the time I stood to leave, no one was talking. Some avoided my eyes. Others followed me with something that looked a lot like respect. As I reached the door, I heard someone say, barely above a whisper, "We've been working for the wrong Delane all this time." I didn't stop walking. But for the first time in years, I let myself smile. And I didn't hide it. 2 days after that meeting, I walked into the same building where I once got ordered to clean up a spilled coffee, like I was the janitor. This time, my name was on the agenda. The lobby smelled like fresh polish and tension. I could feel it in the way the receptionist smiled too quickly, in how the board members huddled near the elevators didn't make eye contact. The annual shareholders meeting was about to begin, and they all knew this one would be different. I stepped into the main auditorium at Valora Group HQ. It was the same space where we used to host holiday luncheons and new client showcases. The same room where, once, a junior manager shared a joke about office trash during a team-building game and everyone laughed. Today, no one laughed. I wore a simple charcoal gray suit, no earrings, hair pulled back, no smile. The chair of the board welcomed everyone with the usual polished optimism. "We're proud to report another profitable year," he said, "thanks to the leadership of our executive team." I waited, patiently. When the floor opened for shareholder comments, I raised my hand. People turned, a few startled. I stood. "I invoke my right as majority shareholder," I said, "to present a grievance to the board." You could have heard a pin drop. Valora, seated near the front, shifted. Her lips pressed into a controlled smile, but her eyes had already started to narrow. I stepped forward and laid a red-bound file on the center table. These pages contain documented evidence of misappropriated credit, retaliatory management practices, and unethical conduct involving both personnel and financial reporting. Someone coughed. No one reached for their water. The head of HR, a woman named Karen Lopez, opened the file slowly. Her eyebrows drew together as she began scanning the table of contents. I continued. Attached are time-stamped emails, project handovers, HR complaints never filed, and documentation of employee reports redirected or erased. Valora still hadn't spoken. The legal counsel leaned forward, flipping through the report. I watched his hand stop at a specific page, and he pulled out a pen to mark it. It was only when I reached the final section that I changed my tone. "And in addition," I said, "as confirmed by the last certified addendum to the Delane Family Estate Trust," I opened a separate envelope and passed it to the chair. "My father named me, not Valora, as the intended successor to any family-held equity interest in this organization. Valora flinched. No, she said suddenly, her voice cracking. No, he never told me that. I met her eyes and didn't blink. Maybe because he knew you wouldn't listen. The boardroom filled with an eerie quiet, the kind you only hear when people are doing mental math with morality and reputation. I turned to the chair again. I motioned for an immediate vote of confidence in the executive board. Silence. Then someone cleared their throat. One by one, hands went up. Not all, but enough. Valora looked around. Her smile was gone. Her voice silent. The chair nodded. Motion passes. Executive restructuring will commence immediately. Security appeared without being called. Quiet. Professional. Valora stood but didn't move. She looked directly at me. You never wanted the spotlight, she said, her voice brittle. Why now? I walked toward the exit and said the words I'd been carrying for far too long. Because this time, I own the room they laughed in. A week passed. The rain hadn't let up once. The same light gray drizzle traced down the towering glass windows of Valora Group HQ, as if the sky itself refused to move on. The city kept its head low, the clouds hanging like grief that hadn't cleared. But inside, everything had shifted. I stepped off the elevator just before 7. Early, as always. But the difference now wasn't the hour, it was the key card in my hand. My badge didn't just let me into my office anymore. It opened every door. There was no hesitation when I walked. No looking over my shoulder. No second-guessing which way power was shifting that day. The halls were silent, except for the distant hum of the heating system and the click of my boots on the polished tile. The air still smelled faintly of wood polish, printer toner, and someone's peppermint tea. All familiar, all the same, but beneath it all, something deeper had changed. Me. I carried my coffee in the same stainless steel travel mug I'd owned for years. Scuffed, dependable, unpretentious. It had survived more boardroom battles than most people realized. And now, as I passed the glass doors to the executive lounge, it felt like a relic of everything I'd earned the hard way. Near the window, a single envelope waited on the armrest of a leather chair. Cream cardstock, hand-delivered, neatly printed. From HR, Structure Update, Subject, Acting CEO, Isola Delane. There it was. No interim title, no temporary placement, no asterisk hovering over my name like a footnote to someone else's legacy. It was official. I sat by the window and watched the city begin its slow, familiar routine. Lights flickered on in the towers across the street, each square of brightness marking someone waking up to a new morning. The break room ice machine sputtered awake somewhere on the floor below. A janitor's cart squeaked gently near the freight elevator. None of it was new, but everything about it felt different. The silence didn't feel lonely, it felt earned. I sipped my coffee and leaned back. Let it settle. The people who passed me in the hall didn't greet me like they used to. Gone were the awkward nods, the too casual, "Hey there," or the dismissive smiles. Now it was, "Good morning, Ms. Delane." "Congratulations, Ms. Delane." "Welcome back, Ms. Delane." And that name, Delane, it didn't just belong to him anymore. It had stopped being shorthand for someone else's power. Now, when they said it, they meant me. They saw me. But there was something else, too. Behind the professionalism, behind the new formality, a trace of curiosity, a flicker in their eyes like they were trying to read me, map out who I'd really been all those years, what they'd failed to notice while whispering behind closed doors or laughing at my expense. I didn't give them answers, only the work. Then she appeared. Valora. I hadn't seen her since the shareholder vote. The whispers said she'd cleaned out her office quietly that same night, slipping away without a word, without a scene. Just gone. Now she stood in the break room doorway. No suit, no jewelry. Hair undone, face bare. Not a single file in her hands. Not even a phone. She looked like a woman who had nothing left to defend. I followed her in, quietly. She turned when she heard my steps, slowly, like someone too tired to fake anything anymore. Our eyes met, and this time, hers weren't sharpened to wound. They held no defiance, no fire, just something heavier, something that looked a lot like regret. "I was afraid of you," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "You were always better, and I couldn't stand it." I didn't interrupt. She wasn't finished. "I needed to win something for once," she continued, "even if it wasn't mine to win." Her voice softened to almost nothing. "Please, don't shut me out forever." The words didn't crash into me. They didn't pierce. They landed gently, like dust on an old book, years too late, settling into cracks already sealed. I didn't offer comfort. That wasn't mine to give anymore. Instead, I reached into my bag and handed her a thin manila folder. Inside, her finalized severance agreement, her HR contact, and a clean ending. "This is all that's left between us," I said. She didn't take the folder right away. Her hand reached out, but not for the papers. For me. She touched my hand like it might undo something, heal something, reverse time. I let her. For 1 second. Long enough to remember the first time she took credit for something I built. The first time she smiled as I was diminished. Then I pulled away. "I don't hate you," I told her, "but I'm done bleeding to keep you whole." She nodded. Didn't argue. She turned and left with the folder held tight to her chest. Later that afternoon, I walked past the hallway where someone once left a sticky note on my desk that read "Office Trash" in bold red ink. That same corridor where people used to lower their voices when I walked by, where my ideas got repeated by louder mouths and rewarded with louder applause. A young analyst, couldn't have been older than 25, stood by the printer. He saw me. Eyes widened. He straightened like he suddenly realized who I was. "You built this, didn't you?" he asked. I stopped. Looked at him, not with pride, not with superiority, just peace. "No," I said. "I rebuilt it." Back in my office, I sat at the desk she used to claim as her throne. The room was brighter than I remembered. The windows felt wider. Maybe they'd always been that way. Maybe I just finally saw them. I opened the bottom drawer and pulled out an old photograph I'd kept hidden beneath a stack of notebooks. Me and Dad, outside the first Delane storefront. The beginning. He had his arm around my shoulder, and I had a paintbrush in one hand and my ponytail slung over the other. We were both smiling like we didn't yet know how hard it would get. No cropping, no filters, no edits, just truth. I set the photo on my desk, right where it belonged. I didn't need to rewrite the story. I just needed to reclaim it. And now, I had.